The man who entered the haunted town. The forbidden path. It was supposed to be a simple road trip, just a man looking for adventure. He had no idea that what he was about to discover would trap him in a nightmare he couldn't escape. He had been driving for hours through thick woods and desolate country roads when he came upon a sign, a weathered, rusted sign that read, "Welcome to Hollow Creek." He'd never heard of it before, but the curiosity that filled him was irresistible. The sign was old, peeling, but he didn't mind. Something about the name felt off. Hollow Creek. It almost sounded like a warning, but he ignored the feeling, dismissing it as superstition. He turned his car onto the narrow, overgrown road that led into the town. The air immediately grew colder, and the trees on either side of the road seemed to lean closer, as if watching him, waiting for him to pass. The wind carried whispers, faint and unintelligible, that seemed to seep through the cracks of his car. When he reached the town, the streets were eerily silent. Not a single person in sight. The buildings, old and crumbling, cast long shadows under the dimming sun. The windows were dark, but there was a strange feeling in the air, as if the town was watching him, studying his every move. He stepped out of his car and immediately felt the weight of something pressing down on him. The silence was unnatural, suffocating. No birds, no animals, just the sound of his footsteps, echoing through the empty streets. He tried to shake the feeling, thinking it was just the isolation of the place, but the hairs on the back of his neck stood up. He looked around, his heart pounding. There was no sign of life, but he couldn't shake the feeling that something was very, very wrong. He walked deeper into the town, the darkness growing thicker with every step. As he passed a row of decaying houses, he saw something that made his blood run cold. A figure standing in the distance, barely visible in the shadows. The figure didn't move, just stood there watching him. He froze. His breath caught in his throat. He couldn't make out any features, just the outline of a person. But something in the way it stood, so still, so unnatural, sent a wave of fear through him. He took a step back, but the figure was gone. Disappeared without a trace. Shaking his head, he told himself it was nothing. He had to keep moving. But as he walked, a cold gust of wind swept past him, sending chills down his spine. The air felt thick, like the town was alive with something dark and malevolent. The streets seemed to stretch on forever, and just when he thought he might find his way back, he saw it. The old church at the edge of town, its bell tower looming against the darkening sky. The door creaked open on its own, and without thinking, he walked toward it. As he entered, the door slammed shut behind him, making him jump. The inside was dark, save for a single candle flickering on the altar. He approached it cautiously, his eyes scanning the room. That's when he heard it. A soft whisper, barely audible. "You shouldn't be here." He whipped around, but there was no one. Just the empty, cold church. His breath quickened. The whisper had been so close, so real. He could feel it in his bones. The temperature dropped suddenly, and he shivered, his fingers trembling as they reached for the door. It wouldn't budge. Panic set in. He pounded against it, but the door remained locked. And then, from the shadows, a figure appeared. It wasn't a man, not anymore. The figure was tall, towering over him, its form twisted and distorted. The skin was pale and stretched tight over its bones, and its eyes glowed with a sickly yellow light. "You're too late," the figure hissed. The air grew thick, suffocating, and the man backed away slowly, his mind screaming to escape. But the figure followed him, step by slow, deliberate step. Leave or die. He turned to run, but the wall seemed to close in on him. The shadows lengthened, reaching out like hands pulling at him. He stumbled, falling to the ground as the darkness consumed him. The last thing he saw before everything went black were the glowing eyes, staring down at him as if they knew exactly who he was. The awakening. He awoke with a jolt, gasping for air, his body drenched in cold sweat. His heart pounded violently in his chest. For a moment he thought it had all been a dream, a nightmare. But the cold, suffocating air that filled his lungs told him otherwise. The town wasn't empty. The figure wasn't a figment of his imagination. He was still there, trapped in Hollow Creek. And it wasn't finished with him yet. He tried to move, but his body felt heavy, sluggish, as though something was holding him in place. His eyes scanned the room, but everything around him was unfamiliar, twisted. The church, the altar, the flickering candle, they were gone. In their place, there was only an endless, impenetrable darkness. And then a whisper. "You shouldn't have come back." He froze. That voice. It wasn't just the figure anymore. It was coming from everywhere. From the shadows that filled the room. It surrounded him, pressing in on him like it was alive. Watching him. Suddenly the air grew thick. The walls seemed to pulse with a heartbeat, slow, deliberate, rhythmic. He could feel it. Something was waking up. Something was stirring in the dark, its presence spreading, filling every corner of the room. He tried to scream, but no sound came. The pressure in the air was unbearable. His throat felt tight, like invisible hands were squeezing it, cutting off his breath. Then the shadows moved. They shifted, twisting into forms, shapes of people, their faces distorted, their eyes wide and empty. They didn't speak. They just stood there watching. Silent, yet their gaze pierced through him, suffocating him, knowing everything he had ever done. And there it was again. The figure. It appeared from the darkness, moving slowly, deliberately. Its eyes burned with a sickly yellow glow. Its smile, twisted and unnatural, spread across its face. It was no longer just a shadow, it was real, and it was watching him with hunger. "You never should have come back," it said, its voice a rasping whisper like fingernails on glass. He backed away, his feet stumbling, his mind racing. He had to get out. He had to escape. But the room was closing in on him. The walls, once solid, were now breathing, pulsing with life. He could feel it. The town itself was alive, feeding on his fear, waiting for his surrender. He tried to push through the shadows, his hands brushing against cold, clammy surfaces, but each movement only brought him closer to the thing that hunted him. The figure was right behind him now, its breath cold and rancid on the back of his neck. "You belong to me now," it growled, its voice like 1,000 whispers combined into one. The shadows twisted and writhed around him, closing in tighter, until he could barely see the light from the distant candle. The world felt like it was spinning. The pressure in his chest increased, suffocating him. He couldn't breathe. And then, as if it had been waiting for the right moment, the room erupted in darkness. A horrible, guttural sound filled his ears, like the earth itself was groaning in pain. The shadows pulsed in a violent rhythm, and in that moment he realized what it was. It wasn't just the figure. The town itself was alive. The evil that had been waiting for centuries had finally awakened, and it wanted him. The walls groaned as if something was trying to break through. The air grew thick with a presence so powerful, so ancient, that he could feel it tearing at his very soul. "It's too late," the figure whispered. "You can't escape." He tried to move, to run, but his body refused to obey. The shadows held him in place, squeezing the life from him. The figure stepped closer, its eyes gleaming with malicious intent. "You will never leave. This town, it will never let you go." The man struggled against the darkness, but it was no use. The shadows, the whispers, the evil, it had already claimed him. It was no longer a nightmare. It was his reality. And then the ground beneath him cracked open. A low rumble vibrated through the earth, and before he could react, he was pulled down into the depths. The last thing he heard before everything went dark was the whisper, so close to his ear as if it was coming from inside his mind. "You are mine now." Curse-like ending. As the darkness consumed him, he felt something stir within him. A cold, creeping sensation that ran down his spine. It wasn't just the town anymore. It was inside him. He had brought it with him. And now, it was watching him. You feel it, don't you? The cold creeping along your spine. The whisper. You're not alone anymore. And now, neither am I. If you dare to know more, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. You'll need it.